Why aren't you sleeping? I often find myself late at night thinking that I should be going to bed, just watching a YouTube video until 3 AM. My goal would have been to go to sleep at around 12, but I end up going to sleep at 3, which isn't good. I'm a terrible morning person after a short amount of sleep as well, so I know the consequences. Still, with that little amount of sleep, the night after, I just still get energy like until 3 AM again, and the same thing happens over and over again. I know all the good things why you should go to sleep and why you should go to bed, and I generally want to go to bed, but I don't. Do I just not know enough about the subject, or is it something different? Am I the only one having this problem, or are there more? There's gotta be more. Can't be the only one. So my goal for this video essay is to find out what my problem is, and at the same time fix that problem. And by doing that, if you have this same problem, there's a pretty big chance it might fix yours as well, or at least give you insight on why you're having this problem and how you could try to fix it. So we're going to talk about a number of subjects, mostly about sleep. We're going to talk about the history of sleep. We're going to talk about folklore and mythology. We're going to talk about science, which is pretty important. We're going to talk about if you can sleep too much, if that's bad for you. We're going to talk about if stress is something that might be a thing. We're going to talk about procrastination, which might be a surprise, but it holds a lot of information that I overlooked in the past. And we're going to talk about how to fix the issue we both might have. And of course, in the end, we'll give a little conclusion about this whole essay, and we'll see what it turned out into. I hope you will learn something from this video, and I hope I do too. So let's get right into it. To start things off, it might be interesting to look into the history of sleep, the backstory of sleep. How did it all start? What did people think about sleep before the science? The interesting thing is, people haven't slept all their lives. They've only been sleeping since a couple of thousand years ago. That's obviously not true. Sleep is something the human body needs. But before science, before everything we know about sleep, people thought different things about it. I'll give you a couple of examples. We have the myth Baku, which is a myth about an animal that devours nightmares. This animal is made up of all leftover parts of other animals, and it's put together into one, and this animal devours dreams. We've also got elves. These are elf kind of creatures that go ahead and sit on your chest while you're sleeping. And this is called an elf attack, which means elf pressure. This means that an elf just goes ahead and just sits on somebody's chest. This pressure keeps getting heavier and heavier until the crushing weight of this elf wakes up the victim. But that's not it. They wake up, they can't really breathe, and then they can't move. So the elf is just sitting there and they can't move. We've also got an incubus. An incubus is a demon in male form who, according to mythology and legendary traditions, lies upon sleeping women in order to engage in sexual activity with them. We also have Inguma. Inguma is the god of dreams, but it's not such a good god as you would think a god would be. They thought that he was this evil kind of god that entered houses at night and plagued the residents with nightmares, and he also killed people while they were sleeping. There is also a bit more of a modern theory that is going around. This is mostly going around in Korea and Japan. It's that when you run a fan in a closed room, no open windows, doors closed, that it can cause death. And to end it up, I'll tell you a little bit about a nicer myth. It's a mythical character, and it's called the Sandman. You might have heard of it. This Sandman puts people to sleep and encourages and inspires beautiful dreams by sprinkling magic sand onto their eyes. So they're not all bad. Most of the bad ones are basically, you're sleeping, somebody goes into your chest, on your chest, in your mind. They kind of screw with you a little bit, and you can't wake up. You have a bad dream, you have a nightmare, or you die on your sleep. Nowadays, all these things have medical solutions to them. We have research that shows what happens. It's interesting to see that a long time ago, people were also thinking about how these things happened in our minds. Why is sleep such a weird thing? We have dreams, we have night terrors, we have nightmares, we have night paralysis. They didn't know about any of this stuff, so there must have been an explanation, and that's why they went onto mythology. They thought that there was some kind of dog sitting on their chest, because this was probably in a dream. People saw that, and then they kept believing that. Eventually, people started to do some more research into sleep. I'll give you a brief rundown of how it started and how it kept progressing. Around 450 BC, a Greek physician thought that sleep was a spell of unconsciousness brought by the lack of circulation in the brain. So around 450 to 400 BC, people thought that sleep was caused by a lack of blood in your brain, causing it to numb out and go to sleep. About 50 years later, people thought that sleep was an arrest of consciousness in the heart. It was only in 162 AD that Galen identified the brain rather than the heart as the seat of consciousness. Over the next 1600 years, however, little progress was made in understanding the nature of sleep. Now there's a big leap in time here before they really made any progress on any sleep discoveries. In the 1900s, neurons were discovered to be the individual units of the nervous system. The year 1925 was the start of the research of one of the most distinguished workers in the field, Nathaniel Kleitman. He discovered the existence of rapid eye movement, also known as REM sleep. In 1935, the German researcher Bunning recognized the existence of the biological clock. Maybe all these years don't really mean anything to you, but the most important thing to get out of this is that the research in sleep is a slow process. We're gonna talk about the little bit more scientific side of sleep we know now, but still now we don't know a lot about sleep. It's such a mystery, especially what happens in the brain. We started to get to know more about the consequences though, and why sleep is important, and why you shouldn't sleep too little. A little bit of a different question right here. Does every living thing sleep? Different kinds of animals sleep differently, but they all sleep. It might not look like they're sleeping. With some animals, half of their brain is sleeping, while the other half is awake, so they can just keep moving without being caught by predators. Some animals need little amounts of sleep, which means that their sleep is a lot more efficient. And we also need a certain amount of sleep to make sure that all the toxins in our brain are being recycled and gotten out of. The amount of sleep we need is often thought of as we only need 6 hours of sleep a day, which is completely wrong. It is. I recently watched a podcast and there was this sleep scientist, Matthew Walker, who knew all about the importance about sleep. He was talking about why to sleep and why not to sleep too little. I'll give a brief summary of this podcast and the most important points. I'll also link the podcast in the description below. One of the first things he talks about is that men who sleep 5 to 6 hours will have a level of testosterone, which is that of someone who is 10 years of their senior. So a lack of sleep will age you by a decade in terms of that critical aspect of wellness, vitality, and muscle strength. Another thing he says is that you are 20 to 30% better in the terms of skill performance after a good night's of sleep than when you were at the end of the practice session the day before. If you get 6 hours of sleep or less, your point of physical exhaustion can be up to 30% or less. With inadequate sleep, lactate acid buildup increases, the lungs' ability to inhale oxygen decreases, peak muscle strength, vertical jump and running speed decrease. The less sleep you have, the higher the risk of injury also. At 5 hours sleep, there is a 60% increased probability of incurring an injury over a season. Also, another thing that I thought was really interesting that happened during your sleep. During your sleep, the most important memories of the day will consistently be repeated. You can see it in a couple of steps. Today you learned that the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 make it so that you are able to do something new, as example, juggling. While you go to sleep at night, these patterns will be repeated in your brain. Normally, it would take a minute to complete step 1 to 5, but in your sleep, these steps are rapid fired. The steps can be also seen as neurons in your brain talking to each other. Because they keep repeating themselves in your brain, the connection gets stronger. You are more likely to remember the next morning. Using a light emitting screen before sleeping delays the release of melatonin by 3 hours and is reduced by 50%. This also disturbs and decreases sleep. Insufficient sleep across the lifespan now seems to be the most significant lifestyle factor in determining whether or not you'll develop Alzheimer's. Insufficient sleep is linked to cancer of the bowel, prostate and breast. You cannot get back the sleep you lost previously by sleeping for longer afterwards, making a regular sleep routine all the more important. 20 hours of sleep deprivation is equivalent to being legally drunk, physically and mentally. Driving in a state of drowsiness causes more car accidents than alcohol and drugs combined. So all these points I just mentioned, they might shock you, they might not, but I knew all these things. I watched this podcast and I still have the same problem of not going to sleep. I know sleep is the best thing to do, really, if you don't want to get Alzheimer's, a heart attack at a later stage in your life. So what's going on in my mind right now is that a lot of sleep is good and having too little sleep is bad. But I was thinking that if a lot of sleep is good, 8 to 9 hours, can sleep be bad if you go over 9 hours? If you sleep 10 hours a day, can it be bad for you? So what can happen when you sleep too much? Oversleeping has been linked to a host of medical problems, including diabetes, heart disease, and an increased risk of death. But how much sleep is too much sleep, you might ask yourself. The amount of sleep you need varies significantly over the course of your lifetime. It depends on your age and activity level, as well as your general health and lifestyle habits. For instance, during periods of stress or illness, you might feel an increased need of sleep. Although sleep needs to differ over time, and from person to person, experts typically recommend that adults should sleep between 7 and 9 hours each night. There is a chance that you are sleeping too much because you know that sleep is good for you and you think, well, now I'm just gonna sleep 12 hours a day. Don't do that. Another reason you can sleep too much is because of a medical disorder. This is called hypersomnia. Okay, now we know the reason why we should sleep enough and not too much. I was also thinking about the fact that maybe stress could play part in this thing that I'm not going to bed early enough, but I know I should be going to sleep. So would stress be a factor in this problem that I and you as well might have? So I was just thinking, like, when don't I have stress? I've been on holidays for 3 weeks. I didn't have any stress. And I still had the same sleeping problem. So all my stress was gone, but I would still find myself late at night in bed watching my phone and watching some YouTube videos. Stress can actually keep you awake at night. A little bit of stress is actually good for you. It keeps you alert and full of energy. Too much though can harm your quality of life and keep you awake at night. Even though you might feel tired, you may end up getting less sleep than you actually need. To come to a conclusion, I might have a little bit of stress, but I don't think it is enough to actually keep me awake at night, because when I eventually go to sleep, I do fall asleep pretty quickly. Yesterday I watched a movie especially for this essay. It was called The Machinist. If you don't want to be spoiled about the movie, you can skip this part. The plot was basically there was a guy who hasn't slept in a year, and he was being really confused because when you don't sleep for a year, I mean, you get confused apparently. So this guy didn't really know why he wasn't able to sleep, and eventually he came to the conclusion that he did a hit and run. So he killed a kid while driving his car. Then he drove away in his car and he was not able to sleep because of that. This led to him not being able to sleep and making him kind of go mad. In the end, it all came together to him, like he started to remember and he came to the conclusion like, okay, this was my fault. So I was thinking about this. Would it be able to actually be awake for a year? No, it wouldn't, because there have been people who tried challenges like the longest stream or radio play. They all need to sleep in between because otherwise you can actually die. The interesting thing about this is that I was kind of procrastinating watching this movie altogether because I really wanted to do it for this essay to see if it has any, I don't know, different perspective it can give me on this subject I'm talking about, but it didn't really. The only thing that came in my mind was that I was procrastinating watching that movie, and then something clicked in my head. So I procrastinated watching a movie, and I have the tendency to do this more often than just by watching a movie. So might it be able that I procrastinate sleep? So I was digging into this, and this is what I found. So it turns out that bedtime procrastination is a thing. The definition of this is bedtime procrastination is defined as failing to go to bed at the intended time, while no external circumstances prevent a person from doing so. So the things that I, and maybe you as well, were looking for as a solution, they all were the wrong thing. Was it stress? Was it not getting enough sleep? Was I getting too much sleep? Was I looking at my phone screen too long? Did I not know enough about the subject? That might not all be the case. It might just be that you procrastinate that you go to bed. And I think this is, for me at least, and I think if you are really struggling with this as well, finding the thing that holds you back from going to bed, this is it. They did a research on this. There was an experiment done to see if sleep time procrastination is a real thing. They surveyed 177 people and they asked a couple of questions, and in these questions there were questions like, I do not go to bed on time, or there are questions like, I have a regular bedtime which I keep to. So those questions are kind of divided in two parts. So one is something you would answer yes to if you have sleep procrastination, and one is something you would answer no to if you have just a normal sleep schedule. In the end, they found out that sleep time procrastination was a real thing, and it's actually a problem. This most of the times comes associated with just normal procrastination, not being able to do things beforehand, so you know you have a deadline, but you only start working on it a week or a couple of days before the deadline, whilst you had a couple of months to work on it. So, I think we found the issue now, but how do we fix this issue? If the procrastination issue is not your thing, these fixes will not help. You might have to go ahead and research things yourself that might help you as well. But for sleep procrastination, I found a couple of tips that might help you, and I'll be using them as well. So tip 1 is see if you can do something regular about sleep. Because procrastination is all about not being able to follow up on a schedule. So your problem is you can't go to bed at, I don't know, 10 at night. Well, try to go to bed between 10 and 12. So you kind of go to bed at 10, and if you go in between those 2 time slots to bed, it's a success. Try to keep that going, and eventually, whilst you are able to get into that rhythm, you might decrease the gap. So it's from 10 to 11, and then from 10:30 to 11. So you keep making that portion smaller. Another thing you might be able to do is work on different things, not just about sleep, but try to work out twice a week. This is also a thing that builds up rhythm, and you need rhythm to get rid of procrastination. You don't just have to work out. You could also say, before I go to bed, I meditate for half an hour. Just having a rhythm is the key to getting rid of this problem. Also, a good thing is to know a lot about sleep if you're having trouble with this. Watch the podcast from Matthew Walker with Joe Rogan. This will give you insight on why you need to sleep and why you gotta be motivated to work on this problem. Because if you aren't motivated, it most likely won't work trying to work on it. And the only fix that is available for this, it's not really a fix because it's just engraved in your head. It's just part of your life that you procrastinate, and you can't really be blamed. But the only thing that can fix it is yourself. You gotta put your mind to it. You gotta really 100% focus on the thing you want, and eventually you'll get it done. It might take a year, I don't know, maybe longer, but if you keep on trying, you will get there, and giving up is not the way to do it. So you gotta keep pushing, and then you'll be able to do it. So my plan for now is I am going to meditate half an hour before I go to bed. So for me, it doesn't really matter when I go to bed, but I keep in my mind like, okay, I gotta meditate half an hour before I go to bed. So if I wait until 3 o'clock and I'm really tired at 3 o'clock, I can't really meditate anymore, because then I will fall asleep while meditating. So then my mind thinks, okay, so I gotta plan it a little better. So say I'm watching YouTube videos and I'm like, oh crap, I gotta meditate half an hour before I go to bed. So let's do that right now, and then I'll go to bed. So that is a trigger, that meditation. It has different benefits, but it also right now gives me the benefit of a trigger. Okay, I meditate, then I go to bed. Don't do anything between meditation and going to bed. Don't check your WhatsApp. Before you meditate, say to everybody, okay, I'm going to sleep, I'm gone. Turn off your phone, you go meditate, and then you go to sleep. You can do this in all different ways. You can simply just brush your teeth, and after you brush your teeth, you can go to bed. So that's the trigger that allows your brain to notice like, okay, I built up this trigger because you've done it 20 times, brush your teeth, go to bed. And if you do it now, you brush your teeth and it's like, oh, I gotta go to bed. So it becomes a little more automatic. And for some people, this might take a lot longer than for other people. And I think for me, it will take a long time, but I'm definitely gonna try and do it. So that is the way I am going to tackle this problem, and hopefully it will work. So to come to a conclusion, I think all the information I gathered was actually pretty useful. Even watching that movie, it didn't really give me any extra insight, but it just sparked something up in my mind, and it was like, oh, this might be the problem, and that turned out to be the problem. So if you're having the same issue and you want to do research, I highly recommend doing research, because it just gives you so much more insight into your own problem. So do your research, or if this video helped you, that's good enough, because indirectly this video is kind of research done for you. I picked out the most important parts. I will link everything in the description below, all the sources I used. I'll link them from most important to less important, with like the Joe Rogan on top, because that just gives you all the insight on why you gotta pay attention to this problem, why this problem is important. So check out the description, definitely do that. There will be a little more information in the description as well. And that's about it, and that's probably why you're not sleeping. I have a little more side notes to give right now. So why did I choose for this format to do it? Because it's an essay for school. I was allowed to do it in every single form there is available, and I chose to do it in video form. Not necessarily because I like making videos, but because I think people can actually use this to fix their problem. It might just give them that spark that I got while doing this research to fix the problem they have. And if I put this in an essay of, I don't know, a couple of pages, I'm not gonna read that, especially with my procrastination. I don't have the nerves to do that. So for me, it feels that this is the best way to share the knowledge I gathered from all this research I did. I really enjoy doing the research. I highly recommend you do it as well if you're having some kind of problem, because the internet is so full of all this information. Go ask a couple of friends for sources that you might be able to use. I did as well, and I came across a couple of cool sources like the mythology sources. They don't really add much, but it's interesting, and it sparks your interest into thinking more about the subject that you want to research. Alright, so this concludes my essay about why are you not sleeping. If you didn't have this problem, I hope that you found it interesting, at least that you learned something new about it. And if you haven't learned anything new about it, check the description out, because there's gotta be something in there you don't know, or you gotta be Matthew Walker who just knows everything about sleep. But that to the side, let me know if it worked for you. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to know anything else, if I missed anything, please let me know. I'll try to help you in the comment section. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.